Breaking news coming out today that a World War III nuclear target list has just been leaked. Let's go ahead and take a look at the latest articles coming out today, December the 9th, 2025, so you can see it for yourself. Everything that we know about Russia's target list, as all 23 towns and cities in the UK are revealed amid World War III fears. This coming out today. Here's some other articles coming out on it. Russian politician names the 23 UK towns and cities in the target list, and it's low-key terrifying. 5 hours ago, also 4 safest places from nuclear war in UK as Russia's 23 town strike list is leaked. But also, we had received this earlier this year, warnings about the United States as well. A chilling list of U.S. cities most likely to be hit first in World War III if it begins, including the unlikely Midwest hotspots. And we are hearing that things have intensified in roughly the last 24 hours with what is going on between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. Let me know your thoughts. Do you feel like we're going to be going to World War III? If you think so, put WW3 in the comments. But let's go ahead and take a look at some more of the articles so you can see what's been happening in the last 24 hours. Putin preparing for war against NATO as top general sends ominous World War III warning. Russia to attack NATO. You can see the date on this, December 9th. Putin aide reveals his plan as Europe prepares for World War III-like conflict. And this is because, take a look at this, we are seeing in the past couple of days here, the U.S. has threatened to withdraw from NATO if Europe doesn't take defense lead by 2027. Donald Trump has taken a new stance. He said, we are not just going to sit here and lead the charge for NATO as they're going to war and doing all of these things. They need to step up. In fact, there's an X post we're going to look at here where they say either step up or pay up. If Europe is Europe, just a museum. Ask Trump's NATO envoy. They're just sitting there idle, he says. U.S. has set a new deadline for Europe-led NATO defense that leaves officials divided. You can see this coming out about 3 days ago. And here's that X post. U.S. warns Europe to handle its own defense, pay up or gear up. And also coming out in just 2 hours ago, Trump gives Zelensky a new deadline on the peace plan. According to reports, we're hearing that this is coming out here. New updates regarding everything that is unfolding with Russia, Ukraine, World War III, nuke target lists for the UK. And as I mentioned earlier in 2025, we received the same thing for the United States as well. I'm going to go through the lists, the articles, also video footage of what has come out in the last 24 hours so that way you can see the latest for yourself. And I see the WW3s pouring into the comments as people are saying they believe we are going to World War III. Now, we will see. Hopefully not. I will keep you up to date on everything regardless of whether that's the route we go or not. I'll be sure to report it here on the channel so you know exactly what is going on. Now, as you know, I'm going to cite the sources. I'm going to put them on the screen, read right from them, hyperlink them down below so you can click them. Go read them for yourself. See the dates, where they're coming from, what it is they have to say. If you appreciate the accountability that I provide here on the channel, take a quick second. Hit that thumbs up like button for me. Help spread this out further across the YouTube platform. Looks like we've got a little over 1,000 people on with me live so far. If we can get that like button up to 500, if you haven't hit it yet and you see it's not at 500, please do so. It helps out the channel a ton. To stay up to date, it's totally free. Hit that subscribe button, and also a lot of additional resources linked down below along with the articles. I know a lot of people are trying to figure out ways to save money. They're concerned about what's going on with the economy. We're going to be seeing what unfolds here. Donald Trump is trying to push $2,000 checks from the tariff dividends rebate thing. We're also going to see what's going to happen with interest rates. There's a lot of things that are happening. I'll keep you up to speed. But if you want to be proactive, and now is the time as we enter into the new year, check out the links below. I've got an assortment of different links, totally free. You can check and see what are the best options on various insurances and things for you. So check that out if you are interested. But let's go ahead and get right to it. And first, let's start off with the U.S. list. Then we're going to take a look at the list that just came out today, December the 9th, 2025. So first, let's go back down memory lane here. You can see this was June of 2025. Chilling list of U.S. cities most likely to be hit first if World War III began, including unlikely Midwest hotspots. So a chilling list had been revealed, which showed U.S. cities which were most likely to be hit first if World War III were to happen. Now, this was back when we were having conflict with Iran. There was concerns about this. Now there are concerns with Russia. And we saw that leaked list come out today for the UK, which we will take a look here at in just a second. But here it is, most likely targets in the US if war were to break out. You can see number 1 is Honolulu, Hawaii. Number 2 is Shreveport, Louisiana. 3, Ogden, Clearfield, Utah. 4, Cheyenne, Wyoming. 5, Great Falls, Montana. 6, Colorado Springs, Colorado. 7, Oklahoma, Nebraska. 8, Albuquerque, New Mexico. 9, Houston, Texas. 10, Seattle, Washington. 11, Los Angeles, California. 12, San Francisco, California. 13, Chicago, Illinois. 14, Washington, D.C. And number 15, New York City. Those are the locations they're saying would likely be hit if World War III broke out and there were nuke attacks on various U.S. cities. You can see some of these are locations of bases in the United States. Some are just hugely populated areas where they would want to do some serious devastation to the people of the United States. So that is the one that was released before. Now, let's take a look at the one that has just recently come out. You can see 4 safest places from nuclear war in the UK. As Russia's 23-town strike list was leaked, you can see this came out today. A Russian propagandist has warned that Britain could not exist overnight if Russia chooses to attack. After the ex-deputy prime minister of Russia revealed the list of 23 towns allegedly included in the nation's hit list, Brits have been left wondering where the safest spots in case of a full-blown attack are. The UK has long been threatened by Russian officials with the possibility of a third world war hanging in the balance. So you'd be forgiven for feeling a tad bit worried following the release of this specific list. Simulations have depicted how being bombed could look like in what has been a reminder to many of a Cold War, which took place in the mid to late 20th century. Now, as the UK continues to support Ukraine during Putin's invasion, it's no surprise that Russian officials have not been best pleased. So it might be worth making note of the nation's safest areas just in case. Former Deputy Minister Dmitry Rogozin, who was previously in charge of Russia's defense industry for 7 years, was responsible for making the dreaded list of British targets public. So we saw that this was released just today. Let's go ahead and take a look at this list here. It says Rogozin went as far as publishing the map, which highlights potential targets in the UK if World War III were to take place, with Kremlin TV host Vladimir Solovyov adding that Britain could simply not exist overnight. So here's the full list. We've got Glasgow, Belfast, 5 Mile Town, Barrow-in-Furness, Bolton, Telford, Aberporth, Merthyr Tydfil, Glascode, Bristol, HMNB Devonport, Yeovil, Aldermaston, London, Stevenage, Ampthill, Derby, Sheffield, Wharton and Samlesbury, Newton, Aycliffe, Tyne and Ware, Edinburgh, and Rosyth. And I know I probably butchered those names, but those are the names that are on the list here. It says, so if an attack were to be carried out on the UK, where should you go? Well, apparently there are 4 areas which should be at the top of your list in such a situation. It goes without saying that nuclear attacks would devastate any city or area targeted, as we've seen what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the past. As you can imagine, the safe areas are a good distance from any of the listed potential targets, while also being largely rural areas, as nature can provide a natural barrier to any fallout or blast waves. So if you are in the UK, you're going to want to go to the Scottish Highlands, the Snowdonia National Park, the Outer Hebrides, and Dartmoor and Exmoor. Those are the locations you're going to want to go, along with the locations that will likely be hit first. So this is the new list that was released today the 23 towns, cities, the strike list. And this is for the UK. And as I mentioned earlier this year, we received the warnings for the United States. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are you concerned about nuclear war, about World War III? If you are, put yes in the comments. If not, put no. Let me know your thoughts down below.
Talk to your healthcare professional about Ozempic, like I did.
This off here. 1 second. All right, I'm going to play some video footage for you.
The long
looks like there's some commercials.
pause.
Just a second.
Classic corporate.
All right, here we go. Let me get you caught up on this. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Sometimes that happens while you're live. If you appreciate the live stream, hit the like button. Let's take a look at this video footage, getting you caught up as to what is going on right now with Zelensky, Ukraine, NATO, Russia, and we're also hearing the United States giving an ultimatum. NATO needs to get it together because they are going to be pulling out. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Let's talk about what's happening in Ukraine as they prepare to present a revised peace plan to the White House after President Zelensky ruled out making any territorial concessions to Russia. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio joins us from our London newsroom. All right, Ramy, so any details on what the Ukrainians are proposing now that they've rejected a key sort of point of that initial peace plan, which is that Russia would perhaps keep some of its territorial gains that they took under force?
Right. No land for Russia. That is what President Zelensky has said overnight. In terms of that peace proposal that Ukraine could submit, no details yet, but we are understanding, at least from one wire news agency, the AFP, that we could get details as soon as today, Tuesday. So we'll be on the lookout for that. But there was clearly some kind of mood change, some kind of mood shift after President Zelensky met those three leaders of the UK, of France and Germany yesterday there at 10 Downing Street, where we were. He seemed to come out of it with a kind of new resolve, some kind of backing that he was looking for. And basically he said that under Ukrainian laws, under international law, and he framed it through a moral lens too, that he does not have the right to give anything away, and that is what Ukraine is fighting for. And just to catch people up to speed, we're talking about 20% of the country here in terms of what Russia has been demanding, in terms of what that U.S.-backed proposal, the initial one from about 3 weeks ago, was also proposing there. So we should expect to see some kind of pushback from this Ukrainian peace proposal. And after all of that, too, Vlad, President Trump has now blasted European leaders about their handling of Ukraine. We're seeing this strange new kind of paradigm where the U.S. and Europe are at odds over this war. This was on Politico. Take a listen.
They're not doing a good job. Europe is not doing a good job in many ways. They're not doing a good job.
I want to ask
they
you
talk
about
too
that.
much, and they're not producing. We're talking about Ukraine. They talk, but they don't produce. And the war just keeps going on and on.
So a traditional ally speaking quite untraditionally about European allies there. One other thing I want to read you a quote from Zelensky, that he admitted, he shared that Zelensky, that Trump is actually pushing Ukraine to make concessions. It's unclear if it's just this issue of land, Vlad, but at least publicly we know that this has been that biggest thorn in the side of all parties. But Zelensky, for his part, he is continuing to do his shuttle diplomacy. He met Pope Leo earlier today, is scheduled to meet Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. And again, he has said that he could meet President Trump if President Trump is open to it and going over to the United States.
There you have it, you guys. So that's coming out today. And we also heard that Zelensky at this time, as of today, December the 9th, 2025, is saying he is not ceding any land, that is out of the question. Now, we're hearing that Donald Trump has now put a time frame on him, saying, hey, you have got to get to some sort of an agreement here, or, there could be consequences. We're also hearing that he has put that on NATO as well, saying you need to get a hold of this and lead this, not depend on the United States. If you're not doing it by 2027, we're backing off. And that is why we're now hearing these concerns of World War III and that leaked list coming out today as well. from Russia. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this article, or excuse me, this video footage coming out from Fox Business News. As they're going to be discussing the title of this: NATO chaos erupts. U.S. forces Europe to take over defense burden. This coming out in the past couple of days. Let's go ahead and take a look at this.
And today, Ukraine will pitch its own peace plan to the Trump administration as peace talks stall between Moscow and Kyiv. Ukrainian President Zelensky meeting with European leaders in London yesterday. France, Germany, and the UK vowing more security guarantees, adding that European contributions to President Trump's peace plan. Zelensky refusing to cede any land to Russia as outlined in that plan, a proposal which President Trump said Zelensky did not even read in time. Here's the president yesterday.
I just want to see people stop from being killed. 27,000 soldiers died last month. That's what I want to see stop. We, as you know, we now sell equipment to NATO at full price, and NATO takes that equipment and probably gives it to Ukraine. I guess they could give it to others too, but for the most part, give it to Ukraine. And they're working with Ukraine in terms of distribution of equipment, missiles, etc. But we aren't spending money. What we are doing is spending time on a humane basis. We want to see if we can stop the killing of 27. It would have never happened. If I were president, this war would have never happened.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte also meeting with Zelensky to coordinate the purchase of U.S. arms by NATO allies under the prioritized Ukraine requirements list. Reuters is reporting the U.S. is pushing Europe to take over the majority of NATO's defense capabilities by 2027. Joining me now live from Brussels this morning is U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. Ambassador, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. I was struck by the title in the Journal this morning on the story, Europe is scrambling for influence in the U.S.-led peace talks on the war in Ukraine. What can you tell us about the latest here?
Well, good morning, Maria. It's always good to join you. What I can tell you is it's a process, and this war has been going on for 4 years almost. It's not going to stop overnight. What has to happen though is that President Trump needs to be the one that is mediating this dispute, we just I think have to know that President Trump is the only one that can bring this war to an end by bringing both sides to the table, hammering out a deal. He is the peacemaker in chief, and ultimately it's going to take that involvement by the United States, especially President Trump, to do it. And the shuttle diplomacy that's going on, I think, is productive. There are discussions happening, but we need to get not a Venn diagram that overlaps a little bit. We need to get a complete agreement on every point to end this war, and that's taking time. And I'm proud that my friends Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are involved, that they're going back and forth between the Ukrainians and the Russians to see if there is a deal to be had here. The killing does need to end. President Trump is absolutely right.
Yeah, but Ambassador, I mean, look, what about the fact that Ukraine doesn't want to give up any land, and that, of course, was part of the stipulation in the president's peace plan? How is this going to end if Zelensky keeps saying we're not going to cede any land and Putin keeps saying we're not going to do a deal and we're going to keep this going until I get more land?
Yeah, I think you need to look at this through the lens of engagement. Zelensky continues to be engaged in discussing what the options are, including the security guarantees by the United States and our NATO allies. But also, he's got a domestic audience that he has to message to, as well as, his European folks that are currently paying for a lot of his defense. And so you add all that together, and I think right now the discussions continue. And until, we're all told that the discussions have ended and they were either productive or not productive, I think that's the moment. But what one leader says, whether it's President Zelensky or Vladimir Putin, oftentimes isn't it exactly what's going on inside the room. And I have a lot of confidence, again, in President Trump as the peacemaker in chief to getting this done, to keeping both sides engaged and hammering out a deal that finally ends the killing. Because losing 25 to 30,000 people, both on the battlefield and in Ukraine, I think it's just we need this war to end.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Look, the New York Post is out with an op-ed this morning, and it's titled this, Impotent Europeans Can Only Fume as Trump Rightly Sidelines Them from the Ukraine Deal. They call President Trump's peace plan, quote, a triple win for the Europeans, but they're acting like bad losers. The Europeans would rather risk war on Putin's terms than peace on Trump's. Your reaction to this op-ed, impotent Europeans is what they're calling them. And by the way, we know that Europe is holding really the dominance and the influence over the $244 billion in frozen Russian assets. They're divided on whether or not to release that money to fund Ukraine. I know you've talked a lot about using the dividends on that money to rebuild Ukraine. But what about the $244 billion? I mean, why is that still in question?
Yeah, well, I think that my sense of talking to our allies that are going to make that decision in the coming weeks, I think they feel that they have a pretty good path forward to get that done. But again, the United States has not expressed a position, and I think President Trump is just watching it. He knows that this war needs to end. What we don't need is to fund more war. What we need is to have both sides come to the table and resolve this. I was at the Doha Forum over the weekend in Qatar, and one of the things I said was that, you don't go into a butcher shop halfway through the sausage being made and criticize how he's making the sausage, especially if you plan on, enjoying it later. You just let the process work. And I think that's what's happening here. We have a lot of people that are standing on the sidelines, on the outside, criticizing either the process or the participants. And this is where, the United States, again, is the only country, and President Trump is the president that can get this done, and he's the only person that can get this done. And so I think right now we just need to sort of ignore the noise and focus on productive talks between the participants in this war to get it resolved. It's hard, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the hard things.
There you have it, you guys. So we're hearing that is going on right now. Donald Trump is saying that they have got to step up. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one coming out today as well. Zelensky says that Ukraine will refuse to concede territory to Russia as peace talks press on, and we're hearing that it is yielding very little at this time. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Breaking overnight, President Trump declaring in a new interview Ukraine is, quote, losing. Trump's comments to Politico that Russia is in a stronger position came at a key moment in the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine, and as Ukrainian President Zelensky is stating clearly that Ukraine is not willing to concede land to Russia.
If this deal, if Zelensky rejects this deal, is there a timeline? Is there a point at which you say, okay?
Well, he's going to have to get on the ball and start accepting things. When you're losing, because you're losing.
Joining us now is CNN Global Affairs analyst Brett McGurk. Is this a clear sign that Trump is sticking with the U.S. plan that would force Ukraine to give up some territory? He's gone after the president of Ukraine a couple of times in the last couple of days.
Yeah, Sarah, progress has been made in this negotiation. There's a framework for what the end of the war can look like. But on the key issue of territorial concessions, there has been no progress. And it's kind of an error in diplomacy to keep pressing a matter when you know progress can't be made. And right now on this issue of territory, things are stuck. The president seems to have in his mind that this territory is going to be taken by Russia in any case, so Ukraine might as well basically sue for peace and take a deal. But we're in the fourth year of this war, and the Russians have not been able to take this territory in the Donbass. It's called the Fortress Belt for Ukraine. It's their most defensible territory. They consider it critical to the defense of their country going forward. So I actually think the assumption is the reverse. I think Russia actually cannot take this land without enormous costs and over a period of years. That's according to a UK intelligence assessment. But in diplomacy, there's always assumptions you make. The president seems to assume, again, that Russia is going to take this territory militarily, therefore Ukraine has to concede. I actually think the opposite assumption is right, and therefore the formula, you put this framework together, the formula on land is freeze where you are now and stop the war and end the war, which you all want. So this is the key issue of territory. It seems to be stuck. I mean, I think the best play here is to support the Ukrainians through the winter and then in the spring return to the negotiating table. Putin always thinks winter advantages him. He tries to break his opponents in the winter. This is the fourth winter. It's a difficult winter for Ukraine, but Putin is not going to pick up this land militarily. And in the spring, there might be another opportunity for diplomacy. But right now, it appears to be very stuck, Sarah.
Yeah. And meantime, the war is ongoing and people are suffering through it there in Ukraine. I do want to ask you about comments that Trump also told Politico when it comes to how he views NATO and whether a message of tough love is being sent to them. Listen.
We have all seen the devastating images in the news. Homes destroyed, loved ones.
NATO calls me daddy. I mean, I have a lot to say about it. Look, I raised, the GDP from 2% to 5%. The 2% they weren't paying and the 5% they are paying. And they're paying it because when we send things over, NATO pays for it, and I assume they give it to Ukraine. But Europe is being destroyed.
I guess I just need to ask you a couple of questions. What do you think he means by Europe is being destroyed and that NATO calls him daddy?
Well, Sarah, look, America's comparative advantage in the world against countries like China or Russia are allies, our web of alliances, and central to that is Europe and NATO. And yeah, the Europeans are difficult to deal with. It's hard for them to make decisions. Sometimes they act collectively through the EU. That's because of the history of Europe and 2 world wars. Right. I mean, these are arrangements they've put together. I don't think that that kind of, unless the president has some aim here, he's trying to get the Europeans to do something specifically. It is tough love. If it's really America kind of walking away from Europe because we don't like where certain countries' domestic politics are heading, I think that's a very dangerous signal, not only for Russia and Putin, but also for Xi Jinping and China. Who, Xi Jinping and China, he will be making his own calculations about Taiwan, which would be a cataclysmic conflict that we have to do everything we possibly can to deter. And he has said he wants his military to be ready by 2027. So we could be heading into a much more dangerous world here, and we're going to need our allies. We're going to need our allies, particularly NATO and the Europeans.
Brett McGurk, you always have great analysis. I really do appreciate you coming on and talking us through all this. Let us now go to Ms. Kira Rudik, who is a member of Ukraine's parliament after hearing all these things. I do want you to listen to Trump's new comments where he talks directly about your president. Here's what he said.
If this deal, if Zelensky rejects this deal, is there a timeline? Is there a point at which you say, okay.
Well, he's going to have to get on the ball and start accepting things. When you're losing, because you're losing.
What does it mean to you to hear that during this peace process, the president of the United States is attacking your president and European allies, but not Russia or President Putin?
Hello, Sarah, and thank you so much for having me. It is indeed painful because I'm sure it's not only American people who are watching this. There are people fighting at the front line, risking their life for democracy.
All right, you guys. So that is some of the updates as to what is going on, as Trump has said that they are losing right now, Ukraine, and they might need to cede territory. That's just all the CNN that I can take for right now. And if you appreciate me cutting the feed on CNN, just go ahead and hit that like button. It's just so slanted sometimes that it's just hard to bear. I always just say, chew up the meat, spit out the bones. Don't worry about the opinion, but it's just getting too much for me. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the articles here. But that is the latest that has been coming out. And we're hearing, as I mentioned, that there was a list that was released today, a target list, nuke list of 23 cities that are going to be hit in the UK that is revealed amid potential World War III fears that are now starting to rise this week. Also, earlier, we had seen that there was the list of different cities in the United States. Earlier this year, what we had heard was that they potentially could be hit if we saw World War III break out as well. Here is the list: Honolulu, Hawaii; Shreveport, Louisiana; Ogden, Clearfield, Utah; Cheyenne, Wyoming; Great Falls, Montana; Colorado Springs, Colorado; Omaha, Nebraska; Albuquerque, New Mexico; Houston, Texas; Seattle, Washington; LA, California; San Francisco, California; Chicago, Illinois; Washington, D.C., and New York City. Now, if you live in any of these, put yes in the comments. If you don't, put no. Let me know. Is this list very important to you? Or do you live close by some of these locations? I know I can put yes. I'm number 9, Houston, Texas. Now, we are hearing that there is potential for World War III. There's a lot of concerns here. because of what is unfolding right now between the United States and NATO. And you saw CNN kind of getting on Trump saying, oh, he's threatening NATO nations, but he's not getting on Russia and Putin. Well, let's go ahead and take a look, though. We're hearing that he is saying, hey, the United States cannot bear all the weight of this. NATO needs to step up. Putin is preparing for war against NATO as top general sends ominous World War III warning. He spoke out as Poland confirmed a rail link between Warsaw and Ukraine used for sending Western supplies was blown up in an unprecedented act of sabotage. So Russia is preparing for war against NATO. We had seen these threats coming out before. Now we're hearing that this is beginning to intensify. Russia to attack NATO. Putin aid reveals the plan as Europe prepares for World War III-like conflict. We saw that list coming out. And take a look. We're hearing that Russia might be emboldened by some of the moves that are unfolding here as the U.S. is threatening to withdraw from NATO if Europe doesn't take defense lead by 2027. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these articles here so that way you can see exactly what it is that they are saying at this time. This one coming out from the New York Post. The U.S. sets a new deadline for Europe-led NATO defense that leaves officials divided. And it says, the United States wants Europe to take over the majority of NATO's conventional defense capabilities. From intelligence to missiles, by 2027, Pentagon officials told diplomats in Washington this week, a tight deadline that struck some European officials as unrealistic. The message, recounted by 5 sources familiar with the discussion, including a U.S. official, was conveyed at a meeting in Washington this week of Pentagon staff overseeing NATO policy and several European delegations. The shifting of this burden from the U.S. to European members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization would dramatically change how the United States and a founding member of the post-war alliance works with its most important military partners. Now, in a meeting, Pentagon officials indicated that Washington was not yet satisfied with the strides that Europe has made to boost its defense capabilities since Russia's expanded invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The U.S. officials told their counterparts that if Europe does not meet the 2027 deadline, that the United States may stop participating in some NATO defense coordination mechanisms, said the sources who requested anonymity to discuss private conversations. Some officials on Capitol Hill are aware of and concerned about the Pentagon's message to Europeans, one U.S. official said. Now, if you are glad to see this, drop a 47 in the comments if you support Donald Trump saying, hey, NATO, you need to step up, because we're going to step away if you do not take the lead on this. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. No clarity on how the U.S. would measure NATO's progress, though. Conventional defense capabilities, including non-nuclear assets from troops to weapons, and the officials did not explain how the U.S. would measure Europe's progress toward shouldering most of this burden. It was also not clear if the 2027 deadline represented the Trump administration's position or only the views of some Pentagon officials. There are significant disagreements in Washington over the military role that the U.S. should play in Europe. Several European officials said that a 2027 deadline is not realistic no matter how Washington measures the progress, since Europe needs more than money and political will to replace certain U.S. capabilities in the short term. Donald Trump saying, I don't care, get it done. You got 1 year to get this done. Among other challenges, NATO allies face production backlogs for military equipment they are trying to purchase, while U.S. officials have encouraged Europe to buy more U.S.-made material. Some of the most prized U.S.-made weapons and defense systems would take years to be delivered if ordered today. The U.S. also contributes capabilities that cannot simply be purchased, like unique intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance that have proven key to the Ukrainian war efforts. Asked for comments, a NATO official speaking for the alliance said European allies had begun taking more responsibility for the continent's security, but did not comment on the 2027 deadline. Allies have recognized the need to invest more in defense and shift the burden on the conventional defense from the U.S. to Europe, the official said. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comments. Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson said, we've been very clear in the need for Europeans to lead in the conventional defense of Europe. We are committed to working through NATO coordination mechanisms to strengthen the alliance and ensure its long-term viability as European allies increasingly take on responsibility for conventional deterrence and defense in Europe. European nations have broadly accepted U.S. President Donald Trump's demand they take more responsibility for their own security and have pledged big increases in defense spending. The European Union has set a target of making the continent ready to defend itself by 2030 and says that it must fill gaps in its air defenses, drones, cyber warfare capabilities, munitions, and other areas. Officials and analysts said even that deadline is highly ambitious. Now, Washington-NATO relationship runs hot and cold. The Trump administration has consistently argued that European allies need to contribute more to the NATO alliance, but it's not always clear where the president stands on NATO. On the campaign trail in 2024, Trump frequently bashed European allies, and he said that he would encourage Russian President Vladimir Putin to invade NATO countries that did not spend their fair share on defense. Wow. Let me know your thoughts. Now, in addition to that, we also heard that they said even the deadline of 2030 is ambitious, but Trump is saying you have till 2027, and they're saying it is impossible. So the United States might be pulling out of NATO here. Let me know your thoughts. But at the annual NATO Leaders Summit in June, Trump effusively praised European leaders for agreeing to a U.S. plan to boost the annual defense spending target for member states to 5% of gross domestic product. In the months since, Trump has vacillated between a harder line on Russia, the bloc's main opponent, and more recently, a willingness to negotiate with Moscow over the Ukraine conflict. European officials have complained that they were largely cut out of those negotiations. Now, at a meeting of NATO foreign ministers this week, U.S. Deputy Secretary of the State Christopher Landau said that it was obvious NATO allies should take responsibility for Europe's defense. Successive U.S. administrations have been saying this in one form or another pretty much my whole life, but our administration means what it says, he wrote on X. And he is saying that Donald Trump says it is time for Europe to step up. These nations need to step up in their defense, lead the charge of NATO, not rely on the United States. And if you agree, again, drop a 47 in the comments. If you don't agree, drop a 46 for the previous administration. But let me know your thoughts in the comments here. What do you think about all of this? And we're hearing that there are concerns now, though, that if this unfolds, if the United States backs away from NATO, that Russia might become emboldened to attack further into NATO. And as you saw from the articles I shared with you, they are concerned that Russia wants to do just that. And as I shared, we also heard that Zelensky said that they are not going to cede any bit of territory of Ukraine to Russia to put a peace agreement on the table. It does not appear that Russia is anywhere closer to any sort of peace deal at this time either. And we are hearing that they are potentially looking at war with other nations. And that's why we saw that 23-city list come out today, December the 9th, regarding the nuke locations that would hit in the UK if Russia went to war. They're saying this would be World War III. And earlier, I shared with you as well the list that came out this year of cities that would likely be the first targets if World War III broke out to get hit by a nuke in the United States. So, man, a lot going on with this. We're hearing that there is more information that is coming out. Now, as more is shared, I'll be sure to let you know here on the channel. And as I mentioned, articles are linked down below along with additional resources to help you out financially as well. Go ahead and check them out. Now is the time, especially on car insurance. If you haven't looked into ways to save, you might want to check it out. We're hearing that there are people saving roughly around $400. They didn't even know that it was something that they could do. If you moved in the last 2 years, if your credit score has changed, you might want to take a look and see how much money you can save. So those are down below as well. And also, if you haven't done so yet, hit the like button, subscribe to stay up to date. And we're going to be launching that new channel, the Holy Bible channel, KJV, Steve Ram, Monica Ram. Keep an eye out for that as well. But that is the latest, you guys. A lot coming out with potential World War III conflicts, war. I will keep you up to speed. Also going to let you know if there's any updates on those $2,000 tariff dividend checks we've been hearing about. A lot happening with Social Security as well. And there's still conflicts taking place in the Middle East, China, Taiwan. There's a lot going on. I'll keep you up to speed every step of the way. And if you missed my last videos yesterday, you might want to check it out. 7.6 magnitude earthquake struck Japan yesterday and caused a tsunami. So, man, a lot going on. I'll keep you up to speed as more unfolds, though. Thank you guys so much for joining me.